about the workshop. I can answer questions about that as well. And we're just gonna have a lot of fun. So, does anybody have any questions about my background or my expertise? I can kind of elaborate on that, or we can just kind of chat along as I paint. You know, I always like, hey, I'm getting art stuff, I'd love to get them cheaper. Right? So, let me start off by talking, I guess I can talk about the supplies really quickly and then go through the process. I have several heavy body paints that I'm using today. These are acrylics. I'm going to primarily work with acrylic today, but I do have a couple of other water media tools with me. And I have assorted colors. I'm working in a limited palette. And when I start talking about the color scheme, some of you who've taken my color theory class, things are hopefully going to start clicking as you see how I'm applying those into the painting techniques, and I'll walk you through that as well. I'll talk about the specific colors once I introduce you to the exercise, but I'm using heavy body acrylic. Now, there's other kinds of acrylic. There's soft body, there's fluids, there's high flow. The heavy body is what most people think of when they think acrylic. It squeezes out of the tube kind of like toothpaste. It's kind of thick. It's really nice for holding tool marks. So if you want some texture, it's really nice to work with that. I also have a range of brushes and mark making tools. I have some rubber shapers, some palette knives, and again, I will talk about those as I go through. And along the way, if you have questions or you can't see what I'm doing, let me know. I'm not one of those people that'll get completely sidetracked, and I don't want you to get lost. So let me know if you start to feel that way, okay? I also have light molding paste, which is so much one of my favorite mediums that I buy it by the gallon. Right? Sorry, all the photos of me demoing, I look like I'm having an actual stroke in the moment. I'm like, is that what I look like when I talk? Why is only one eye open? You know, that kind of thing. So, the light molding paste is a lot of fun because it is, we can pass it around, it is lightweight, which is a consideration for some of us. Is it going to make my painting too heavy to carry? But it gives you body and dimension without adding a lot of weight. It's also absorbent when it dries. So it works with acrylics, but it also works with watercolors. So it's one of those things that we can have in our studio. I don't know about you, but I love investing in a thing that does more than one thing, you know, because they're kind of pricey. I love it to do a little more. I also brought matte medium. Now, there's also a gloss medium. The matte medium has marble dust in it, so it has a little bit of an opacity to it when it dries, but it's fairly fluid. But if I'm working with lightweight collage materials, like paper, this works as a wonderful adhesive, and it also gives it a little bit of an ethereal quality because it has a little bit of a haze to it. But if you just want to adhere, and you don't want that matting kind of ghost gloss to it, you could just use the gloss medium that doesn't have any color in it.
Can we take more than one?
Yeah, you can take more than one.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think they'll give you 40% off though.
What is this opaque molding paste do?
Thank you.
I'm going to show you. That's what I'm going to use. That's why I brought the big gallon. That's one of the things I'm going to use today. It adds a lot of dimension and texture, almost like that impasto Italian style, but without a lot of weight.
Can you use it with watercolor?
Yes,
Not acrylic?
both.
Okay.
It will work with any of your water media because it can mix in, and I'll talk about that more as I'm going through. I just want to give you kind of a quick overview before I jump in. And can I ask everyone to please silence your cell phones while we're talking, just so it's not disruptive for anybody? We've all been there. I turned mine off as soon as I got here. I didn't want to be that girl. But I have some art crayons, which are a water-soluble wax. So if you've ever used like a Neo color or an art crayon or a watercolor pencil, we can pass this around to you. people want to take a look at that. And I'll walk you through how to use this as well. But these are fun because they're watercolor, but in a stick form, and it's kind of a texture like lipstick. So if you've ever used like a Neocolor 2 or the watercolor crayon, often those are waxy and kind of hard. This one gives you a nice thick stroke, but it's also activatable by water. So you can take a damp brush and blend it or mix it, or you can just layer it on for like thick crayon-like texture. So those are a lot of fun with our mixed media, and also for our drawing. Let's see. I also have, and you'll see this on the supply list for anybody that signed up for the workshop. I mentioned spray bottles, one filled with water and one filled with isopropyl alcohol, either in 70 or 91%. I think 70 is what I put on the list. 70 is a pretty all-around good thing to have on hand. It gives you very specific effects. I'll talk about that more throughout. But it's nice to have a different way to wet something, or if your painting's starting to dry faster than you can work on it, give it a little mist, that'll help. So these are good. What else? I also always have my trusty value scale and color wheel. Those of you who've been in my classes know I'm a big believer in these. And one of my other favorite things that I'm going to use today is a graphite pencil. It's called Lara. We can pass this around too. Please try not to drop it so it doesn't break. It's a water-soluble pencil. It's graphite like a pencil, but I can blend it. So I like to do, I'll show you how I like to use them in particular with my paintings. Okay, and I'll also be working, I have a practice pad here to show you a few things. This is just Fabriano watercolor paper, and then obviously today I'm going to be painting on a large canvas. So, any question, I think that covers stuff, but I may have a few other little things here. Any questions about that before I jump in? And don't worry, I'll show you how to use all the stuff I just talked about, but this way you have an idea of what I'm using before we. It's funny because now I'm starting to go really big. This is one of my smaller canvases. He can attest. He had to go back with the truck and bring home some that are taller than me. Very excited, yeah. It's aspirational. But I thought this was a very fun layout for a landscape and a little something unusual. And here's to hoping that it turns out really well. But challenging yourself to work in an unusual proportion can be a good way to shake things up if you feel like you're in a rut, and you always do a full sheet. Maybe cut some down into squares. It's a whole different challenge doing a design and a good composition in a different format than you're used to. So sometimes that sparks our creativity as well. Will you hand me a sheet of palette paper, please? Should be right back, the yellow one. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about how I get started on these. So I have my idea. What is it that I want to paint? Well, I know I want to do a landscape. And I have this kind of fun photograph. Let me put it over here where you guys can see it. And I can pass this around before I get going. This is a little bit of a cheat though. And you can do this with your own photos, even if you don't have Photoshop. I did mine in Photoshop, but I'll show you the marker too. Is that in this? I see it. So what I did was this is actually two different photos put together, and I cropped out some of the background because I was editing it before I got started. And this is a thing that comes up sometimes in the class. It's like, how do I know what to paint? Or it doesn't look like what I see. Well, you're an artist. Use your own intuition. Make it what you think it should be. If you're painting in the park and you're like, oh, what a beautiful bench, and I love the little old couple looking at the lake at sunset, and there's a trash can next to them. Well, do you have to put the trash can in? No, but it's there. And a lot of people feel the need to copy what they see, But what your job as an artist, and you're all artists, even if you're just trying, but what our job is to interpret it, make it interesting, to show you the important parts. So what I did was propped out what I felt was unimportant. I gave myself a nice sweeping landscape and a pretty color scheme to work with. So we can pass that around in a minute. Let me show this and we'll pass these around together. So I did a fun little quick exercise, which I later destroyed by continuing to work on it, but I had gotten a good photo of a quick version of it that I did in paint. But then I turned it, and I should have done it with the photograph, but I turned it into a black and white, a value study. So just by turning that color off, I can check my design, I can check my values. I want a range of light and dark, and this helps me see it. So when I go in to paint this, I've done a lot of that work already. I've kind of figured it out. And I know that's a thing a lot of people struggle with. And so when I'm working, I start with a black and white, or that photo, usually a black and white of the photo. But let's say I start with this, and I start with the values. And even if you don't have access to a black and white copier or printer, you should have black and you should have white paint. Do a quick little version. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't even have to be pretty. It's not for anyone else but you. Like, it makes it easier for you. And then I played with the color a little. So what kind of color scheme do I want? Do I want it to be blues and greens like the original painting or the original photo was? I added that sunset color behind it. But do I care if it's mountain colored? I don't. No, because it's my art. It's my moment in time. Maybe that photo, it was a gray day or something. So I'm going to give it a better sky, and I want to capture that feeling at sunset, golden hour. So that's the color scheme that I'm choosing. So when we look at this color scheme, we notice that the colors are, does anybody in my color theory class want to take a stab at it? Are they warm or cool in temperature? Warm. So they're on that closer to the sun into the spectrum, yellows, reds, violets. What else do we see? Is there a lot of contrast between the colors?
Yes.
Or are they near to each other on the color wheel? Where'd my color wheel go? They're near each other. So what we have is analogous colors. They're next to each other. We see all of these reds and oranges and violets together are all on this half of the wheel. But we also have something else working for us here. We have this yellow and this purple. What is that? Complements. Colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel, where there's a lot of difference between those colors. Even though most of the colors are still in this range, my two main colors are opposite each other, which gives me contrast and interest and a little bit of a surprise. And there's also, even though it's dominant warm, there's a little bit of a cool color in here in some of these areas in the shadow, like here. And we'll pass this around with the other photos so you guys can see them up close. Why does that matter? Well, if we create an area that's much the same, but we give you a point of difference, that point of difference is immediately going to become very interesting. If everything's the same, are we as intrigued? No. But we're drawn to that dark color that's maybe next to that light bright color, or that warm color next to the cool color. Those differences draw us in and make it more exciting. Okay? So, and that gives you an idea too of what kind of texture and loose movement I'm going for. So when I started out, and I can do the exercise again here, or I can just kind of show you, I took what I thought were the dominant colors there and made a little drawdown and said, I think these colors are going to work for me. You see those little spots there at the bottom, and I'll go through and tell you what those colors are. But then at the top of my page, I put white in the middle, because it's a dominantly light painting, not a dominant dark. If it was a dominant dark, I might have put a little black in the middle. But I put white in the middle, and I put all my other colors around it, and touched and mixed and said, what am I working with? Is this the range of colors that I want? And if you put this next to the two-up painting, the one that's two-up page, you'll say, oh, well, I saw that color in the sky. Or that's the color of that purple mountain. So I figured it out before I get to the canvas. Before I get to the expensive thing, I've worked out my colors. And I haven't wasted half a tube. It's like splotch, splotch. And I have a plan, right? Does that make sense? So the colors that I'm going to use today are actually mostly fairly close together. We have titanium white, which is going to give me all my lights. And instead of a black, for my dark, I'm using, let's all try to say this one 5 times fast, anthraquinone blue. And it'll come around if you're not sure how to spell it.
Color? Is that a new color?
It's not a new color. I'll explain color names here in a second. But I also am going to use benzimidazoline yellow, right? We call it Benzie for short. Yeah. Never heard of it.
No, you can't find it in the stores.
Really? It's, you might need to, we can start asking for it. They may be running through their Hansa stock first. But I'll let you know, this is actually a new color, the benzimidazoline, with an interesting story behind it. Benzimidazoline yellow light. This will come around and you can come, yes.
Francis, if they open their book, it's the listing of the colors.
Yeah, it's right in the, I think it's the first page or second page. Says, yeah, you could just kind of circle the colors. So benzimidazoline yellow, anthraquinone blue. I'm using a quin red, which is quinacridone, quinacridone magenta, and quinacridone violet. Also with titanium white. So this can come around too. Well, actually, really quickly before, where's my other one? Oh, here. So that just basically maps out the layout. And I realize a few things. I'm gonna need to make sure that I have a nice dark. I feel like it got a little soft. I got mostly midtones and lights right now. I also am gonna have to be very careful where the point of interest is. Because even in my little one, it's too dead center. So when I draw it on the bigger canvas, I'm going to pay attention to that. But it gave me an idea of what colors go where. This is a nice reference for me. And you know what? With this, and in a clear vision of what I'm doing, I may not even look at that photo again. The original photo, we've kind of forgotten about it, right? We don't need it so much because it's less about trying to copy and just more like telling you what I want you to know about that mountain. So I'll put these together and pass it around. Is it helping to be able to see these up close? So they're both in the same little sheet. So
Like you're mapping it.
I am, I'm kind of mapping, this is how you make a painting. This is not the only way, but this is a good way to get a good plan, yes.
If you're using straight Winsor Newton watercolors.
Watercolors,
Yeah,
yes.
watercolors. I use arches, but can you use a canvas for watercolor?
You can use a canvas for watercolor if you prepare the surface. There are some specific grounds that you can apply, light molding paste being one of them, that are absorbent and accept watercolor. Crackle paste, absorbent ground, light molding paste, and fiber paste all work well. And there is a variation of them all available in a watercolor line as well. And if you didn't catch any of those, ask me
Now
after.
that fact,
Yes.
Could you have used Payne spray instead of that
You could.
bit long?
The anthraquinone. So the short version is, those are the colors I'm picking. Can you get some other colors that work without using those fancy ones that you can't pronounce that I used? Yes, but every color you use is going to give you a different result. So if you go with Payne's Gray, which is more of a blue than a gray, it's a little misleading, the name, but if you mix it with that, you're going to get a violet. If you mix it with a quin magenta, you're going to get a purple, but it's going to be more of a gray, cool purple. Mine ends up being kind of a warm purple. But it just depends on your color mixes, which is another reason I recommend just putting a splotch of each next to each other and mushing them together and see what you get. Are you happy with the colors? I'll be honest and tell you, I went through 3 reds before I settled on that one. I was like, oh, this looks nice, oh, that's yucky. So then I found a red that worked well with all of my colors that gave me a palette I was happy with. Instead of saying, well, then I'm just gonna use 2 different reds. I limited my palette, but I picked a different red. I started with, I tried cadmium red and pyrrole red, and there was another red. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but I wasn't as happy with it. So I finally settled on the quinacridone red. And the different colors are gonna give you different results. So if you go home and you try to mix colors that look like the ones I'm using today, but you have cobalt blue and alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow, they may be beautiful colors, but they're gonna be different than the ones I'm showing you. On to the painting portion of the morning. I'm gonna ask you to hold this up for me, please. It's gonna shake it out. All right, so this is just painted on canvas, and this gives you an idea of some of the different mediums. And we can lay this out if you wanna touch it, or we can pass it around. But it shows you the texture, and it's painted over a stripe. This is what they look like straight out of the jar, these every other row, without color added. So your grits and your gels are all clear. So they'll come out of the jar white, but they're gonna dry clear. So a gel dries clear. But your pastes all dry white. Why does that matter? And I'm gonna work in a paste, light molding paste. Well, if it has white in it, what's that gonna do when I mix my colors in? See how that color changed between a clear addition or an addition of white. So if you don't want a pastel color, you should put it down, let it dry, and then paint on top of it. But if you don't mind it lightening your paint a little on the paste, you can mix it in and apply it, which is what I'm gonna do today. But you can also get an idea too of the different textures. We have things like pumice gel, which has an aggregate or a grit to it, crackle paste, the camera close up. You can kind of see behind, no, other side, Joe. You turn see behind you on the screen? So, no, the other way, towards you. There you go, hold still. Okay? Now here's the original photo, right here, as well. Okay? So you have an idea. Now that original, again, I edited it then. There's not a mountain in the world that looks exactly like that, and that's okay too. As an artist, I get to make stuff up. So I'm gonna sit, and as long as you guys can still see and hear, I'll have to kind of go back and forth between sitting and standing. So say you have a photo, or you're just looking at a skyline. You can also do the same exercise with a marker. Oh wow, he's way louder than I am. I'll try to project, but you can also do the same thing with a marker and black and white paint. I feel like that is too loud in there. So even if you don't have access to Photoshop or a camera or anything fancy, a copier, you could still take a black Sharpie or your black and your white paint and do a version of this. Okay? Do you guys need to see me do a little one, or can I move on to the big camera? Smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. Good looking out. So I'm going to use this one as a reference for myself. But you'll notice as I work, it's gonna get a little further away from my original, and that's fine, because it's the story that I'm telling. So, okay, let me get, Joe, will you open this giant jug, medium, let me get a drink. Now, today I'm using a disposable paper palette. I use these sometimes when I'm traveling and teaching outside of my studio. But usually in my studio, and this is a trick for anyone, especially if you're eco-conscious, less waste or less waste of your paints, if you're budget conscious as well. Usually in my studio, I use a separate small canvas, and I'll use that as a palette, and at the end of it, I'll switch it out with a roller or something, and then it's a background. You can paint over it, or it has an interesting texture, but I'm not wasting anything. And it's called a roll off or a wipe off palette, because you can also dab off your brush before you rinse it, so you're not putting a lot of paint into the water system, which we shouldn't do anyway, right? Okay, so can you guys see in here? Is any of this in the way? No, it doesn't look like it.
Move the white bucket, please.
This one? Yeah, I'm gonna need this in a minute though. Just need to figure out how to do this where it's not blocking anything. All right, so I'm gonna start with my paint first, and I'll talk all day, so you guys tell me if we're getting close to the time, and I'll.
30 minutes.
All right, 30 minutes, oh my. Paint fast, Francis, talk faster. All right, so, or she says, or we can just keep going. Yeah, we'll have lunch together, whatever. All right, so I'm gonna put some white paint out here, and remember, since I'm gonna make a lot of things with my white molding paste, remember what color does this dry? White. So do I need as much white in my colors? No. So I need to take that into account. And then I'm gonna I'll often put them kind of close to each other, or in a way, where'd my other little smushy thing go? The one where I did my colors together on the same page. Okay, so I'm gonna do 2 dabs, so that's titanium white, quinacridone red, which I can't seem to get the lid back on. It's like a Where's Waldo for right there for a second. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Thank you. I've got my Quin Violet. So often when I'm putting this together, I'll kind of group them how they might appear on the canvas, because that helps me keep it straight in my head when I'm mixing them. Like, oh right, this is the color for the sky. That's what I'm trying to get close to. So benzimidazoline yellow, that's a word you may not have heard before, and then you love how it rolls off the tongue like poetry. Benzimidazoline. It came about because Hansa Yellow, which has been the go-to for a long time. I can't remember if I did this one. Is this Quin Violet or Quin Magenta? I already do. I don't think I did this one yet. I didn't. It's different. So Quin Magenta, Quin Violet. Benzimidazoline we introduced because Hansa Yellow, the pigment quality is not available. The higher quality pigment's not available, and we've discovered that it's not as light fast, the amount of the pigments that are available now. So, or archival. They're still fine, and most of us still have bottles of it in our studio because it's we've been using it for years. But as the pigment got harder to find and the quality went down, the decision was made to instead introduce a new color that was better in those respects. And it's a lovely yellow, and it works very well for mixing. All right, so I'm gonna start with a palette knife. So you can see, and this is a little heavy, but you can see I have my colors out. The ones that went around, so it's a Benzie Yellow, Quin Red, Quin Magenta, Quin Violet, Anthraquinone, and the white, all here. And I'm setting this up. I'm a right-handed painter for the most part, so my paint goes off to my right. I want to stay on the plastics, so I'm going to move over just a wee bit here. Trying to not make a mess in the conference room. Okay. Right here with this. So taking a look at this, I actually could even use one of my art crayons and do my underpainting or a sketch. That's gold. So this is a primed canvas already, it's got gesso on it. But I could either take, it's too close to me, either my art crayon and draw, because if I do this, if I don't like it, it can blend it in with my colors, or I can get it wet and lift it. So a water-soluble crayon works well to do a planning sketch, or you can also use, this is a water-soluble graphite. So I'm gonna say this is gonna be my low point. So I go here, but I might go actually with the art crayon, so I'm not making my colors muddy. So, you know, this is going to introduce gray into my colors, and many of the colors that I've chosen are transparent colors. So they'll show that muddiness more, so I'm probably gonna stick with the art crayon here. So what I've done is I took a little piece of tissue, and I applied matte medium generously to both sides. Now, if you're gonna use this with watercolor, you apply matte medium to one side of it, adhere it, and the other side still absorb it. So you could also do this with your watercolors.
How do you do?
Yep.
Just one side.
So if you're gonna do it with watercolor, just one side. But if you're adhering it like I am, you can do both sides. So what I'll get Joe to kind of hold this up for me. You, carefully at the bottom, maybe pick it up. But you see, I've added a three-dimensional texture. And it's a little bit like cheating, because when I go back and paint it, I can even sculpt it and make more diagonal lines, or make it more veiny. Like I can go in and change, because it's still wet, and you can put a little matte medium on your canvas too to make sure it adheres well.
That's nice.
Isn't that fun?
The sample that you have up, did you use tissue layering on this?
I did not on that one, but there are several mediums applied, like pumice, light molding. I used water-soluble charcoals. I used art crayons, acrylic sprays, inks. I think crackle paste, yeah, and I did some effects with gauze. So there's some watercolors on it. So I brought that as a true mixed media example.
Do you use cat litter?
I don't, but I need to use, for my work, I need to use archival stuff. So,
What's your cat litter?
yeah, you can use sands. I have used beach sand on purpose and accidentally.
I think that one has sand in it.
Which one?
This one.
It might have sand in it. That does sound like something I would do. But it just kind of, it depends. Sometimes you're painting at the beach and you use sand even you don't mean to. It's just windy.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna kind of put a little bit more here, but giving myself an interesting texture. And a little bit of something that feels like stone in myself. And again, here I'm going to mimic a little bit that sweep. I want a little bit of a strong diagonal here, because that's going to help bring interest into the center, the area of focus in my painting. See, I'm just kind of smoothing it. But even though I've smoothed it out, it will get a little stiff when it dries, but you can paint on it. I could also tint this. There's also this cool stuff they have that's called, it's an art supply. It's called artist tissue paper. There's one that's just colored non-bleeding. There's another one that bleeds. And when you get it wet, it diffuses the color into the areas around it. It's really pretty and unusual. People are always like, how did you do that? You know, it's kind of fun. I'm gonna try to move it along here. So even though this is still wet, I'm going in with some of my color, and I'm gonna start filling in and varying this a little bit. Move this down. Got a lighter color here in the middle, and here's that violet. Let's just put this where we can see it. If I put a little of this Quin magenta in with the white and a teeny bit of that blue, I get very close immediately to this color. I need a little more blue, but I'm already almost there. So you see, but it was easy for me to remember that because I've already done the work. I already figured out, oh right, these three colors make that color that I need. So you do a little bit of experimenting, and I guarantee you, you will use less paint, waste less stuff if you do it this way. Stiff bristle brush. And it's just an inexpensive bristle brush, but this gives me additional texture, but it's also a wide stroke. I'm not using what I call an eyelash brush, one of those brushes with 3 bristles on it, trying to paint this whole thing. It would just take forever. Somebody goes, that's me. I know, I remember. He's always bring the tiny ones in the class. Oh, you don't know. Because if you take my class and you show up with only tiny brushes, I will put it in a timeout and give you one of mine to use. Be like, you can have it at the end, but just try it with a bigger brush. And I've never had anybody say, man, I miss my tiny brush. You know, they're like, oh, this is going so much better. That's usually the answer. So now I have this kind of magenta color with a little bit of that Quin Violet, and I'm gonna mix a little more of this blue in and make a really deep, darker color. So remember, I want a full range of values. So when I do a few of these dark marks, I want maybe a purple, and this may be too purple, I might cover some of this. But even just layering this in gives me already more of a sense of depth. So, it's a little harder to work with some of these mediums when it's this humid outside the studio. So let's see. And now I'm going to go on the other side of this, and this is pretty wet, but I want to make a distinction here. This side went a little more violet. Well, this side's more in the red-orange family, so I'm going to use that Quin red and a little of the yellow instead of mixing it with the blue. Now I might mix a little of that blue in, but now I have a harmonious color, but it's on the other end of the spectrum. So we have a little cool and a little warm. I got too much water in my brush. It's getting a little soft. But I can mix some of this in for my darks as well on this side. And because all of these colors have something in common, they're all made with the same base of colors, the same kind of, they all have a little touch of each other. It makes them harmonious. So you don't have a color that just stands out and go, oh, that one doesn't feel anything like the others. You know, doesn't feel like a mistake. So this one, I don't know, we could probably stop here, or I don't know how much, am I out of time? No? At some point, he does have to go back to work, so he can't keep me forever. Unless somebody wants to take me to lunch and take me home after.
Is it too wet to hold up?
No, I can pick it up, but, so it's, I think, might run, but that's okay. So we're starting to get an idea. Is it done? No. But it's got a loose, energetic style. There's a lot of texture. There's an interesting color story, but it's still harmonious. The sides, I typically paint my sides black. I like a gallery wrap style. But if you are not doing that, I would recommend that you paint it around while you're working on it. And honestly, often I will paint my sides first and then touch them up at the end, because I find it easier than getting black on the front and trying to deal with that.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and especially if you're working with something with texture, even if you tape it off, with the texture, you're gonna get bubbles, you're gonna get some of that color transferring. Any questions? You guys are quiet. Thank you. It's a start. I haven't finished finished it. I'll continue to work on it.